So, The Measure of a Man. This is a season 2 episode of Star Trek. It is often regarded by many people as like the first really good Next Generation episode, because a lot of people are kind of dismissive of the first season. Although I actually like a lot of the first season of Next Gen, a lot of people don't, and a lot of people actually consider this like the first really great Next Generation episode. And I think it's going to be incredibly relevant for Picard. This is the episode basically where they establish the rights of Data, what his legal status is, because it's called into question. So if you don't remember this episode, basically what happens is a scientist from Starfleet comes in and he wants to experiment on Data because he wants to make more Datas. He wants to make more Sung-style androids. And it turns out that his methodology is flawed, and there's a good chance he might actually like destroy Data in the process of doing this, right? Mm-hmm. So Data says, I'm not going to do it. I refuse. He even resigns from Starfleet because they can order him to do it, but if he resigns, then they can't make him do it. Or can they? Because what they do is they argue, well, wait a second, Data is a machine. So he's property. He's the same status as the computer on the Enterprise. He's no different. And so what happens is they actually have a trial with the judge advocate of that sector, who has this very interesting history with Picard. I had forgotten because I hadn't watched this episode in a while, and I watched it obviously to prep for the show. And it's kind of funny because this judge advocate, that they deal with, has this history with Picard. She actually led the investigation on the Stargazer, the loss of the Stargazer. So she has this history with Picard, negative history with Picard. But what happens is they have to actually do a trial, and Riker is put in the position where he has to actually advocate that Data is in fact a machine. He's actually placed in that role where Picard is defending Data and trying to stick up for his rights. And it's a really good episode. Like I said, a lot of people consider this the first truly great Star Trek episode. I think it's going to be 100% relevant to Picard because
I actually know the answer to that question.
Well, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but it's from Children of Mars. So on Children of Mars, there's a reference to synth rogues, and so we can surmise from that there is sort of a new faction of rebel synths, basically Sung-style androids. So we can surmise that based on the Children of Mars short track. So I think what's going to happen is obviously there's some sort of feeling of oppression going on with these Sung-style androids. They're being exploited or oppressed. There's a scene in one of the trailers where you can clearly see that they're like there's a bunch of them like in a room, and they're kind of like, who knows, being experimented on, or it's a production facility. We don't really know. But I think this is going to be very relevant in terms of, for some reason, and we're going to have to find out why, maybe those rights have gone away. Maybe these synths don't have the same status that Data did. We know from Brent Spiner's comments that the disassembled Data-looking android is B4. What we don't know for sure is, why B4 was disassembled and put in there. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how this kind of plays into Picard. I do think it will be relevant because they might cite this later on and say something happened where there was a new precedent that was established or something like that. But it's definitely, I think, going to be important to this synth faction that we don't really know much about. These people that apparently destroyed Utopia Planitia on Mars. In this attack that actually occurred, I guess, way before Picard even starts, back when Picard was still in Starfleet and actually preparing to do the evacuation of Romulus. So I have The Measure of a Man. And then let's see here. I have to look at the graphics we got.
I did want to mention there's a new teaser trailer that they put on CBS All Access. I don't know if you've seen the images from it, Eric, but it's the one that actually shows the Enterprise D, like blink and you'll miss it. But in that same trailer, that image we keep seeing over and over again of that black garbed character with the weird, phaser laser looking weapon, right? Or
The one that's
disruptor, whatever.
chasing after Dodge, right? Dodge is her name. The mysterious. Yeah.
Well, in this new trailer, they show that image, and then another real flash, blink and you'll miss it, and it's an image of one of those what I thought were the Sung era androids, and he has a weapon, and he's raising it up to point it. So they're kind of like, but I mean, blink and you'll miss it. But it's the same kind of one where they have like the numbers on the forehead, kind of checks 1138 kind of thing, the barcode, but it's a real brief thing, but it's very clearly in this most recent one that they actually put on CBS All Access.
That's interesting. Oh, we have a comment from the chat. Ballerina KC asks, "What if the synths are working for the Borg? They would be perfect in their eyes." That's an interesting theory. If the synths are in fact some way controlled by whatever's left of the Borg, that's the big question too, right? What is the state of the Borg, right? Are the Borg, like I said, are they just kind of like victims here now, or is there still like an active, collective that's still out there assimilating people? You know what I mean? We don't really know, but that I kind of like. That's an interesting theory. What if the synths are working for the Borg? They would be perfect in their eyes. And by the way, I am going to get to another episode right now. Well, not right now. It's the last one I have, but I'm going to get to an episode that actually had that scenario somewhat. So that's a great comment. That's a great question about whether the synths are somehow in league with the Borg. So the other episode that I did was one of the two-parters. No, I'm sorry. I got the order confused. I want to go in the order that they aired. So I'm going with The Offspring. I can't remember what season Offspring was in. Offspring, if you guys don't remember, was the episode where Data has a child. This is where Data decides that he is going to continue his race, essentially build his race, and he decides to have a child. He creates Lal, this female Sung-style android, and he's able to do this by essentially copying his positronic brain, and he's able to sort of piece together this android that he regards as his child. And it's got a lot of similarities to A Measure of a Man. It's kind of interesting because it almost feels in this episode like Starfleet's already forgetting Measure of a Man, like they're forgetting the precedents already in this episode, because there's an admiral in Starfleet that basically wants to take Lal away from Data. And it's like, this is ridiculous. It's like, what are you even thinking? It's like, and Picard gets to that point. There's a neat point in that episode where, the admiral is like saying, you know what? I don't really care what any of you think, because Data says no, Lal says no. Picard is obviously like, no. And he's like, I don't care. I'm an admiral. I'm just going to take her. And Picard says, no, you're not. You know what I mean? He actually, and, the admiral's like, Picard, this could destroy you, because you're basically, contradicting direct order. And Picard says, hey, history is full of examples of people that, blindly followed orders and did terrible things. And I'm not going to be one of those people. So it's a very powerful episode. I think it's definitely going to be relevant to Picard because obviously, again, we have this issue of what are the rights and status of these androids. Even with Measure of a Man, even in TNG, we have this episode where they're already forgetting that. They already don't care. They're already, regarding them basically as second-class citizens, because they are willing to do this to Data to take his child away. And what does it do? It kills Lal, because she suddenly has emotions. She becomes, it's Lal, right? Lal. She suddenly has emotions, and it overwhelms her because she doesn't have the chip, like the chip that Sung made specifically for Data for emotions. It overwhelms her positronic brain, and she dies because of fear, essentially, because she's not built to accommodate that. And because she's so afraid of this admiral taking her away from her father. And this really gets me now, by the way, because I am a father, and it's like it's pretty heart-wrenching. But I definitely think it's going to be relevant to Picard because we have again this issue of what is the rights, what is the status of these people, of the Sung style androids, and we definitely think they're going to be in Picard. So I think that this episode is going to be extremely relevant.
And I was going to add, this episode obviously plays into my theory that I know there's no way in the world that it's right. That the character Dodge or whatever that we see, I had this feeling that she could be, you know what I mean, maybe an android, and maybe she contains some of the memories, of kind of Data's child. That crazy theory.
And by the way, Heather knows the answer to that.
And I'm sure there's no way that's true.
So,
which would be a major spoiler. So don't go there, Heather. Don't go there.
Say this real quick. Since the last time I spoke, where I said I know all that, until now, Section 31 has come in and made me sign an NDA. So now I'm not allowed to talk about it. Okay, go ahead.
There we go. Right. There we go. Because Heather knows the answer to that, Dave. She knows whether your theory is correct or not. And of course, Dave, your theory is that basically Dodge is Data's daughter, essentially. That's your theory. Yeah.
Right. And the reason I had that is because, just so you know, Heather, the reason I had that is I think it was the second or the first full trailer. There's that scene where Data is painting and Picard's walking up to him, and Data turns to Picard, and it's a female figure. She's on it looks like an edge of a cliff, and there's this crazy storming, raging ocean. And he turns and he's handing Picard the brush, telling Picard, "You have to finish this painting." And it's like he's passing the reality of taking what he started and having to try and find a way to finish it. And there's a couple different ways to look at that. But my initial thought when I look at her character is I could see where, and you can even see in this image here that we've got, that there's enough similarity there that in my head, I'm thinking it's like, it would explain why Picard would be like, no, this is my responsibility and I have to take care of this. That it's almost like protecting the legacy of Data. And that same idea could extend beyond the fact that, whether she is or isn't Data's, child or daughter in a, metaphorical sense or whatever. But anyhow, that's what I thought. I just had this, because it would explain why she would know to go to Picard, why she would trust him and know he would protect her. Anyhow, that's my crazy Picard theory that I know there's no way in the world it's true.
That Section 31 agent is sitting there in the corner looking at me.
All right.
It's pretty scary, I have to say. Very intimidating.
Yeah, that they came right into their show at Starfleet Underground, and they because she asked that question, yeah. Dave. She asked directly, so Section 31 came in to their show and edited it, but she knows the answer.
Yeah, so they threatened me, and I basically, if I say anything, they'll rip out my tongue, and I like my tongue.
There you go.
I like tasting.
That is important. And then I have one more. This is the two-parter that I chose. This is a scene from Descent parts 1 and 2. I believe this is actually from the second part, this particular image that we're showing. But this one is relevant for so many reasons, really. And it kind of relates to the question that we were asked in the chat, which is, this was a scenario where there were Borgs and the Sung androids working together. And the basic premise of this episode is that after Hugh was released in the previous episode, I, Borg, after he was released and he came back to the Borg Collective as an individual, he basically wrecked everything. The individuality of Hugh corrupted the other Borg on his cube and they basically got to the point where they couldn't function. And luckily, quote unquote, Lore came across this dead Borg cube and took it over. And Lore came up with this idea that basically he was going to help the Borg become 100% synthetic, basically become androids like him. And this actually appealed to these Borg that were stranded and severed from the collective and unable to function. And of course, they start to become very aggressive, very much like Lore. He actually gets them to become emotional and aggressive. And then he actually manipulates Data using the emotion chip that Dr. Sung had made for Data, but Lore stole in a previous episode. Lore had actually stolen the emotion chip that was created specifically for Data, and he was using it. And then he uses it to sort of, I guess manipulate is the correct word. He manipulates Data by basically providing him with emotions, which again, Data can't really process. So he's having like these very negative emotions. He basically kills a Borg and he likes it. He takes pleasure in it. For the first time in his life, he actually experiences emotion, and they're very negative. And this is all because of the manipulation that Lore is doing. So I think this is definitely going to be relevant. I don't know if this is necessarily like, I don't know if I'm going like full on like prediction, but I've talked with Dave about this. I kind of want to get your take on this too, Heather. I would love to see Brent Spiner come back as Lore. I think that would be really, really cool if Lore became the big baddie of Star Trek Picard, and that he was kind of going back to this plan of using the Borg. And, now you have these, you have multiple Sung style androids, and he goes back to this plan, of sort of incorporating them together,
Yeah.
And whether he's in it or not, his legacy is there. You know what I mean? Because that was Lore's idea. And I think that's definitely going to be in Star Trek Picard. They're going to explore that idea a little bit more. There's definitely some experimentation going on involving the Sung style androids and the Borg, which was Lore's idea.
I would love to see that, because the one thing that I really liked about Lore is seeing Brent Spiner's emotions come through. I thought that it really enhanced it. I love that. I would like to say one thing about this episode real quick is when he does kill that Borg and he experiences those emotions, he goes into the holodeck and he tries to recreate that in many different ways. He tries to recreate different emotions in many different ways. And one of the emotions that he would try to recreate was lust. So he was in the holodeck with some chicks trying to get it on. And
yeah, that's true. Yeah, he says that in there. Yeah,
right. And on our previous podcast, I was like, well, it's a good thing Geordi didn't like walk in during that time, because that would have been more awkward. And my co-host Rocky was like, oh, that's because there was a sock on the holodeck door. That's the reason why he didn't walk in. So we had to create an image of the sock on the holodeck door and Geordi looking at it like, huh? And not going in. And I love that. So I had to bring that up.
Well, he does end up coming in at an awkward time anyway, because basically
I don't know.
Sitting there simulating killing the Borg over and over again. And that's when Geordi walks in.
Like seeing that or seeing him naked. I don't know. I think I would have preferred the latter. I mean, the part where he's strangling the guy, like, yeah, that would have been really bad.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I could definitely see that. There is a really dark moment also in this episode. Speaking of Geordi, there's a dark moment in this episode where they have captured a Borg, and he has an ability to give Data emotion, and he actually is able to get Data to basically admit that he would actually kill Geordi to get that high again. He would actually kill his best friend just to get that emotional high. You know what I mean? It's a really dark scene. It's really kind of messed up, and to see Data doing that. And also, you were mentioning about how cool it is to see Lore, because Brent Spiner got to show emotions. But what's really neat is he gets to show emotions as Data in this one. You know what I mean? And he gets to show that this is like the first time Data is having emotions and he's having real problems, like, you know, because obviously he's being manipulated. You know, Lore is only giving him the bad stuff, you know? He wants to make him aggressive. He wants to make him hateful. You know what I mean? He wants to make him resentful. So he's only giving him like negative stuff. But yeah, Data takes kind of, you know, well, not kind of, Data takes a very dark turn. He experiments on Geordi. He actually like experiments on him when he kind of knows that Lore's experiments aren't working and are probably going to kill him, you know? So he takes a very dark turn in this. But again, I think that this premise that Lore came up with is going to be one of the big things explored in Star Trek Picard, is going to be this premise of mixing the Sung-style androids with the Borg, and that's somebody else has taken up that mantle. But I would love, and again, I can't say it's a prediction because I don't think it's going to happen. But I would just love for Brent Spiner to come back as Lore, and that be like the last episode. The big reveal is like Lore's behind it all. You know what I mean? Like he's the one that's manipulating all the pieces. You know, and he's gone back. You know, he's gone back to this plan. You know, I think that would be cool.
Well, and it's interesting because if a lot of what you theorize in terms of the idea of, you know, slavery and stuff, like if the rogues are in a sense kind of like freedom fighters, you know, by the time that we would get potentially to that moment with Lore, you know, Lore's a freedom fighter now. You know, he's acting as a terrorist. Yes, you know, he's you know, continuing on the same trajectory he was on, you know, going back to this episode. But at the same point, we're gonna pop, if this was to happen, Lore is cast in a slightly different light. You know, he may not be using the right way to go about it, but at the same point, you know, he's a freedom fighter now.
That would be a really interesting twist. So that essentially Lore becomes like an anti-hero. You know what I mean? He's not like a full-on villain anymore. He kind of that kind of reminds me of Magneto, you know, in X-Men, you know, that kind of role where he's like, yeah, he's a bad guy. I mean, there's no doubt he's a villain. He's a bad guy, but you kind of feel for him. I mean, you can kind of feel, you know, Magneto's position, right, in X-Men.
Yeah.
And if Lore became something like that, that would be really cool. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that would be really cool. That would be really neat to kind of make him sort of more of like an anti-hero, where he's actually trying to kind of help the situation, maybe on both sides, because the Borg are being exploited and his kind are being exploited. You know what I mean? And he's trying to do something about it because he's not into it, you know? So that would be really interesting.
I don't think he's going to do that just because of the character. He's the definition of evil. So if he did help him, it would be to advance his own agenda, not because he actually wants to help him.
I know, but he could still come across as more of a, you know, that could be the way he presents his argument. It just casts him in a slightly different light. It doesn't really change who he is, you know. But,
right. But if he presented that argument, it would be to manipulate the others to do what he wanted them to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I could see that. I could totally see that. Yeah, I agree with you there. But I think it would be a neat thing to play with. Like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I just would love it if they had Lore, and because really, again, it does feel like this idea of Lore's is going to be explored extensively in Picard, of the fusion of the android and the Borg. You know,
I'm not allowed to say Section 31 staring at me. It's even creepier when they send their like alien people in here. I mean, it's not even a human, and he's this guy has 8 eyes. It's really creeping me out.
And he's got all of them on you, Heather. He's got all of them on you.
Yep.